you can see the flower beds here at Bucky Harris Park are still waiting to be planted, but pretty soon this downtown will be filled with lots of activity over the summer. We're going to be outside doing all kinds of wonderful things. You want to think about your skin, and May is Melanoma Awareness Month. Joe Levy from Smart Tan International is an expert on this topic, and he's going to dispel some of the myths of melanoma. Joe, what is the significance of Melanoma Awareness Month, and why do you think there is such a month?
Well, there's no doubt that the public needs to be educated about skin cancer prevention in general and sun safety in general. And this is a topic I've looked at personally for over 16 years, investigating the research on this topic locally and nationally. I was hired 16 years ago by this organization to investigate what the truth about skin cancer research is. So it's something that is very political at times, and probably more political than it needs to be. But I think it's important for people to practice sunburn prevention at all times.
So now that we're starting to get outside more, do we, meaning people that live in this climate, need to be more aware of the sun and how we protect ourselves?
Absolutely. My organization has promoted through our constituents across North America. We have 6,000 member facilities in North America. Something we call the golden rule of Smart Sun, which is simply don't ever sunburn. And the thing about practicing sunburn prevention is that it's a dynamic concept. And what I mean by that is you can tell somebody, put on sunscreen and don't sunburn today. And they might do that for that one frame in time today. And you can tell them to do that tomorrow and the next day and so forth. But eventually people go outdoors for extended periods. And when they do, the people who aren't acclimated to sunlight, even if they use sunscreen, generally are more susceptible to burning than those who have gradually built up what we call a base tan prior to going outdoors. So we teach people the golden rule of Smart Sun and of Smart Tanning: don't ever sunburn. And we teach them to do that in a practical way that acknowledges that there's both benefits of regular exposure to UV light and risks associated with overexposure and burning.
So there is something to that whole, I've got to get my base tan before I go to Florida or before I go on my cruise. There really is something to that.
Absolutely, and this is just a widely misunderstood topic. The base tan, essentially, a tan is your body's natural protection against sunburn. It's an intended body function. Your body is designed to process ultraviolet light. As you build up a tan, your body becomes more acclimated to sunlight and you're able to stay out a little bit longer. A tan generally will prevent you from burning by a factor of 2 to 4 times. It'll increase your natural protection against sunburn. In combination with proper usage of sunscreen, that makes you much less likely to sunburn outdoors than someone who doesn't have a base tan. It essentially, it multiplies the effectiveness of the sunscreen.
So why are we constantly being told, avoid the sun, wear a hat, if you get sunburned, you're going to get skin cancer? I mean, why are we constantly being bombarded with that kind of information? And it's almost a fear factor of going out in the sun.
It is exactly a fear factor, and it's an insulting message to put that sort of absolutist spin to it. There are billions of dollars, we estimate $35 billion a year, are made by people who market products designed to prevent any and all UV exposure from reaching the body. And what we know now is that people need regular ultraviolet exposure. Ultraviolet light is the body's natural way to produce vitamin D, and humans are intended to make vitamin D through exposure to sunlight. It's how we get 90% of our sunlight. We now know, and I've been very involved in this research as well, that vitamin D levels, we probably need 5 to 10 times more vitamin D than we've been told. We've only discovered recently that these higher levels of vitamin D actually play a role in reducing the risk of many forms of cancer. There's substantial research on this. There's clinical research. Random controlled trials now have shown this relationship exists. The research connecting vitamin D with positive effects from UV light is much stronger, actually, and much more quantitative than the research connecting the negative effects of overexposure to UV light. It's interesting. I've had the privilege of attending some scientific events where the vitamin D community and the dermatology community have actually come together in one event setting, which is very rare. They're different disciplines. Scientists are generally kind of myopic and they look at their own discipline. When they come together and you compare the relative strength and veracity of the two fields, the vitamin D research is so much more substantial and has so much more credibility behind it now, especially in the last 5 years, than the research on effects of overexposure to UV. And that's not to say anybody should ever experience overexposure to UV. What we need to do is to moderate the message. And I'm certain it's going to come to that point. Public health advisories are going to come around to accepting regular moderate exposure to UV as necessary for proper public health. So you're right. The absolutist message is insulting and overdone, and it needs to be moderated. And I think we're starting to see that. In Canada, they've seen it. The Canadian Cancer Society now recommends that people get regular exposure to UV light. The American Cancer Society has not followed suit to that extent. But in Canada, 97% of the population is vitamin D deficient.
Yeah.
They're sun deprived, and that's the only logical explanation for that. In the United States, we estimate about 60% of the population is vitamin D deficient.
Is that because there's more southern exposure?
Exactly. You need UVB present in sunlight in order to process vitamin D naturally. And the further north you go, the less UVB there is in the sunlight throughout the season. And in Canada, what we call vitamin D winter, where there's not enough UVB to make vitamin D at all, is present 6 months out of the year. In the United States, vitamin D winter is generally from November through March, where you don't make any vitamin D.
So how do people in Canada what's a way for them to get vitamin D? What do they do in the northern climates to get that?
Well, there's two things. One, you can supplement vitamin D into your diet. It's an unnatural way to get it. You're designed to get vitamin D through sun exposure to the skin. It's the only quote-unquote vitamin that you get from an external source. Of other vitamins you only get through diet and through supplements, but this is the natural way to make vitamin D. You can get it through supplements. That's one strategy. The other strategy is not to overuse sunscreen. And this is really the biggest thing I'd like to discuss, is that sunscreen is being marketed today as a 365-day-a-year, 24/7 product that people are supposed to wear all the time in any climate. And what we know is an SPF 15, for instance, blocks 99% of your body's ability to make vitamin D naturally. So sunscreen should only be used in times of the year or times of the day when you are likely to experience sunburn. If you're going to be out for a long time in the summer, you use sunscreen. But as a daily use product in the spring and the fall and in the winter, what you've done is you've extended the period of time that we have this vitamin D winter, where you can't make any vitamin D naturally through sun exposure. And so instead of having 4 months out of the year where you can't make vitamin D, you've extended that to 6, 7, 8, or longer, depending on how much sunscreen you're using every day. And people think of sunscreen as a beach product, but what I'm talking about are women's cosmetics primarily, because women's cosmetics today are marketed with a product that blocks UV, and SPF 15 is present in most foundations today. That completely prevents vitamin D production in the spring and fall, and is no doubt related to the epidemic of vitamin D deficiency that we're seeing today.
So when I'm being told by an ad in a magazine or by a commercial on television that even a moisturizer has this SPF of 15, and I'm being told that that's a good thing, that every day, no matter what time of year, I want to put that sunscreen on my face to protect myself from the sun. Actually, I do want to get some sun on my face and on my skin in order to get that vitamin D and build up that resistance to getting a burn. Is that right?
Generally, what you want to teach people is that sunscreen should be used as a product with intent to prevent sunburn on a specific occasion, not as a daily use, everyday product. That's overuse of the product. Sunscreen has not been shown to prevent melanoma skin cancer. In fact, most studies show that there's either no association or actually an increased risk for melanoma for people who use the product. Now, I don't want to confuse anyone and think that I'm saying don't use sunscreen.
Right.
It is an excellent product with a use that's very intended for sunburn prevention, but not for daily use.